Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama. The Professor. The trick to fighting a gigantic homicidal lion man with a tree trunk for a weapon. I know, a cracker of a first line for any podcast. The trick to fighting a giant homicidal lion man with a tree trunk for a weapon is to avoid standing where the tree trunk currently is, or more importantly, where it enthusiastically is planning to be in approximately half a second. You may wonder how I know these specialized techniques. Well, the painful truth, and I highlight the painful part of prior sentence, is that I've been made into a bloody smear by a number of clubs over the years. A number of clubs, a number of times, and I've improved my technique a little each time on my return. Hopefully, you remember that I am normally immortal, so when I make a, let's say, mortal mistake, normally I can learn from it. Not so this time. No mistakes could be made. If they were, I would be utterly dead. I am not immortal here. Gosh, it's so complicated. This means I cannot get it wrong at all at this time. Makes my focus on the whole giant tree thing a little more important and imperative. I know the idea of not being in the way of the club sounds sensible. I mean, it sounds utterly obvious, really. A no-brainer. Many things sound obvious right before they cave your skull in and render you without a brain. But you do have to even realize the obvious at times. There are some weapons in life you can parry. A sword, for example. A dagger. Possibly even a mace if you're feeling athletic and haven't recently consumed several pounds of trench bread and battlefield gin. Another story of learning right there. But I digress. There is no blocking a simply shaped oak tree swung by something with shoulders the size of confession booths and enough muscle mass to alter local gravity permanently. The tree thing came swinging around in enormous looping arcs, figure eights of death that made the air howl and the mud tremble. Well, as did my various sphincters, if I'm honest. Every swing felt less like an attack and more like an end of sorts. I knew that each swing could have tired my foe, but bitter experience had taught me that giant lion-headed supernatural entities do not tire of swinging their clubs in the way one might imagine. So waiting for him to get weary was, well, it was out. My only, yet impossible goal was to stop the movement by grounding the club, anchoring it for a moment. Force all that monstrous momentum into the mud long enough for me to do something educational to its owner with my sword. Simple in theory. Many of the stupidest ideas in history have been simple in theory. Unfortunately, several things complicated the matter. Firstly, I hadn't practiced my swordsmanship skills for some time. Modernity has ruined us all. Guns have a dreadful tendency to make one lazy about edged weapons. A pistol, in my humble opinion, requires no poetry, no spiritual commitment. You simply point and ruin somebody's afternoon from what's often polite distance. I know. Some of you will raise a lip in irritation at my downplaying of the need for technique in gunplay. But believe me, as an expert in firearms, not an expert self-declared, but an expert by those who know this vulgar art well, the sword is much more complicated to master. As a result, a much harder skill set to maintain. The second complication in staying away from the clubbing blows here was trying to do so while wearing leather-soled handmade dress shoes in what was essentially a soup made from mud, blood, intestines, and dead regrets. My footwear, as you can imagine, had the traction of drunken penguins on polished marble floors. And through all these complicated thoughts, the Balkalavian roared and swung again. I narrowly avoided another decapitation through what I shall generously describe as instinct and less generously describe as blind, screaming fucking luck. And that's me being blind and screaming, you understand? Not the goddess Luck herself. As I understand, she was otherwise occupied. But I must thank that lovely lady later. Which, weirdly, I had a hunch I'd be able to do. If she wanted me to, that is. If she continued to, bless me. Are you blessed by luck? I digress again. Anyway, back to the big bastard, swinging the big bastarding club past my face. Strange the things you notice in moments of stress. I noticed in great detail that the bottom of said club was encrusted with mud, gore, and at least one identifiable, probably human rib, as it whipped past my face close enough to spray me with wet filth at the apex of its arc. Wonderful. A mouthful of... better not to think about it. Battlefields are always described romantically by people who have never been on one, or who have never been on one and are made mad by it, or by poetic ponces who are deliberately and safely elsewhere. But nobody ever writes, "The hero smelled faintly of opened boughs and damp socks as he attempted not to die." The great beast, untiring as previously said, continued the endless pattern of swings as it moved slowly towards me. Left, right, up, down, like a metronome designed by M.C. Escher. That's E-S-C-H-E-R as opposed to Escher, E-S-H-E-R. That's Escher in Surrey, which is nothing like M.C. Escher. And fuck all like a metronome. I digress again. Anyway, I needed him to commit to a downward strike. To do that, I would have to move to his flank while the club was on its upward swing, and remain still enough that his instinct would drive the next blow directly downward towards me. Unfortunately, this meant that the target offered would very much be my very valued head. Another swing came. I threw myself ungracefully clear. This time I lost my footing entirely and collapsed backwards into the mud with all the dignity of a bishop falling downstairs drunk on communion wine. The mud accepted me lovingly. Now, this was not technically part of the strategy, but combat training teaches adaptability, or more accurately, to panic efficiently. The Balkalavian did what all oversized monsters eventually do when they think they're winning. He laughed at my predicament. Villains adore evil laughter. At times, they should probably just get on with it, but, they can't resist it. Somewhere, deep in the dark heart of depravity, is the absolute certainty that everybody nearby desperately wants to hear a speech. So he made his witty, cinematic quip. "The Balkalavian takes another soul!" He bellowed to absolutely nobody who cared as he looked camera left. I didn't have the heart to tell him that our podcast budget only allowed the audio side of storytelling, not the visual. Still, one lives in hope. Digression. It did give me a moment to ask a question, though. "Can we discuss this, old chap?" I politely requested, which he rudely ignored as he raised the club higher overhead for the killing blow. Higher and higher. Dear God, this was really going to hurt. Higher. No, now from there, this was not going to hurt at all, because I was about to become a thin biological paste spread artistically across whatever the fuck this was, instantly. I scrabbled uselessly at the mud, tried to rise, slipped immediately and landed flat on my back once more. Oh, bollocks, was all I could manage. The monster now moved to loom over me. He was rather good at looming, whilst holding that enormous trunk aloft with terrifying ease. I was in the moment impressed with the quality of the loom. Muscles writhed beneath striped fur. His lion face split into a grin. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The smile said,
"Observe, tiny scholar, I am about to turn your skeleton into abstract art."
I wanted to close my eyes, but that seemed, under the circumstances, a bit melodramatic, if I'm honest. Then came the grunt of effort as he committed fully to the downward strike, like a lumberjack attempting to split the world with a blunt axe. The club descended, and I moved. Now, I'd love to tell you that what followed was a refined, evasive technique passed down through the generations of master swordsmen. But it wasn't. What I actually employed was a manoeuvre I would later record in my own combat writing as the sausage roll. Yes. I curled my arms tightly to my body and my legs tightly together and simply rolled sideways through the mud with a desperate velocity and all the elegance of a dog turd rolling down a steep concrete embankment. The impact where I had been was colossal. I didn't see it because my face was submerged in the mud at the time of its impact, but I felt it all right. The ground convulsed. Dirt, blood, and chunks of things unpleasant rained over me in a warm shower. There was no plan now, but there was opportunity. The giant strained for a moment to wrench the embedded club free from the sucking mud. The earth held it for a precious instant. Muscle would eventually win, of course, but eventually is a very useful word in combat. Before the creature could recover, I rolled back towards him, sword gripped awkwardly, hilt in my right hand, blade in my left for control. And I hacked downward at the creature's wrists. Now, my swordsmanship may have become somewhat rusty over recent years, as I've said, but my weapon maintenance certainly had not. The blade sheared through flesh beautifully. It slowed its movement for a moment as it struck bone. Slowed only slightly, yes, but then punched through the radius and ulna of the creature with a wet, and I must add, very rewarding crunch or three. Ah, now I got to beam a genuine smile. The next few moments were magnificent. The Balkalavian screamed, not in pain, no, in feral outrage. That's an important distinction. Pain is human. Wild outrage is utterly divine. All the force he'd committed to pulling the grounded club free suddenly had nowhere to go but upwards, and at great speed. His gigantic paws still held the weapon, and his handless arms flew upward violently. Blood erupted skyward in pulsing arterial fountains. For one glorious instant, he looked less like a warrior and more like an extremely surprised, decorative fountain. Blood spattered into the mud around us. His blood. And I smiled. The sausage roll had now proven itself a legitimate martial technique. Further generations would be made aware of its use and the precise, detailed technique itself. Unfortunately, while I was privately congratulating myself, the monster neglected to die in a timely fashion. I had rather assumed that losing both hands would dampen the mud and his enthusiasm simultaneously. A lack of blood kills most things pretty damn quick, you see. Instead, he stared angrily at the gouting stumps. How would Will comment on this?
He looked proper pissed off with him.
What followed should not in theory have happened, but it did. His gaze went from pumping stumps to the grounded, muddy me. Oh, shit. He slowly, but with a resolute decision, raised one enormous clawed foot above me, and then, but the utter fucker, stamped. I wasn't prepared, but fortunately for me, the sausage roll technique had applications across multiple combat scenarios. This time, I mixed it up a little and rolled to my right instead of my tried and tested left. Interestingly, I noticed, mid-roll, that techniques rarely transfer equally well across both sides of the body due to lateral dominance. The one side is generally stronger or more coordinated than the other, you see. Apparently that doesn't matter with the sausage roll. A truly democratic art form. The giant foot smashed into the ground where I had been moments earlier. Again, the shockwave of the impact rippled through the mud and into my ribs. I didn't see the foot land due to an important part of this sausage roll strategy, my face being once more in the mud. I was beginning to resent this battlefield personally. The instant the foot landed, I rolled back towards it, and I slashed hard at the rear of the ankle, or where I hoped the Achilles tendon would be. One never entirely knows with lion men. Thankfully, anatomy remained reasonably consistent across nightmares. The tendon parted. The Balkalavian collapsed with a howl that shook mud from broken walls. Not hamstrung exactly. More Achilles strung, perhaps. The creature crashed to its knees, roaring in fury, while blood poured into the mire around it from its still pumping wrists. At this point, I elected to employ another highly advanced combat maneuver, known technically as scrabbling away on hands and knees like a terrified badger. Once I reached what I considered to be a safe distance, I turned. The creature glared at me with naked hatred.
Finish me, Simon.
It growled.
I am beaten.
I nodded, only falling over twice before managing to get to my knees in the slippery stuff. I prepared myself. My sword's hilt leaned against my shoulder, its point sunk into the mud as I tried unsuccessfully to wipe my filthy hands clean on already ruined trousers. The Balkalavian was finished. We both knew it. Still, I approached carefully. He knelt upon ruined limbs and bloody stumps. Blood pooled steadily from his points of amputation. His breathing became ragged. His eyes closed. I raised my blade to prepare my downward swing to remove his head. And then I paused. His neck was the width of an oak tree. I'd be hacking at the thing until bloody winter. So instead, I lowered the blade and brought the edge gently against his throat. His eyes opened again, immediately, and he turned that magnificent bestial head towards me.
It's the quickest way, old chap.
I explained softly. For a moment, we simply looked at one another. A great many things passed silently between us in that glance. Respect, hatred, relief, and ultimately, understanding. You would not understand it unless you have stood knee-deep in mud preparing to kill something ancient. That language belongs only to survivors. Finally, he turned his gaze back towards the mud, and he closed those magnificent eyes. 2 slow breaths, a nod, and he lifted his wonderful chin. I cut deep with a well-honed, scalpel-like edge. The throat opened to reveal a wet, crimson smile. Thick arteries burst hot across my hands, and a venerable waterfall of blood was greedily drunk by the mud. He tried to laugh. Only a fluid-filled gurgle emerged. His windpipe no longer agreed with the idea of a laugh. And then the great creature collapsed, face first into the mire, with all the ceremony of a toppled statue. You would think killing something like that would feel triumphant. Let me assure you, it did not. The thrill in these matters always comes later. The thrill, you see, is survival. The horrible, delayed understanding that you are still alive, in spite of it all. I stood there breathing hard, leaning against, I suppose, in an undignified manner, the corpse of something older than nations. Something I had killed. Then slowly, the sounds of battle returned around me. Screaming, steel, gunfire even, the wet sounds of dying. And somewhere nearby, that fucking fairy giggled and clapped.
Lucifer. For several long moments after the killing, nobody in the drawing room moved. The room itself needed time to recoil from such an efficient yet beautifully brutal evisceration. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked once with the nervous hesitation of something wondering whether it still wished to exist. On the far side of the enormous leather sofa, what remained of Belphastus lay in pieces sufficiently distributed so that one could no longer confidently describe him as occupying a single location. The mist of blood that clouded the air settled as steam rose gently from the ruin. Something wet slid slowly down the wallpaper. The smell was extraordinary. Copper-rich blood, opened bowels, burned flesh, and cheap aftershave. And faintly beneath it all, the ghost of cigar smoke and old velvet. Then the werecat stood from the task she had undertaken, hidden from me by the couch. She rose from that carnage with all the lazy indifference of a house cat getting up from a windowsill after disemboweling a songbird. Beautiful, yes, but absolutely horrifying, even for one such as me. Her Victorian maid's dress had once been immaculate Gothic perfection. Now it looked like somebody had dragged a dominatrix through an abattoir during a hurricane. The tiny black lace skirt hung in shredded ribbons, soaked so heavily in blood that the fabric clung obscenely to the lines of her hips and thighs. Gore painted the once white frills dark crimson. A loop of something unpleasant, I suspect intestine, but chose not to investigate further, hung briefly from the hem before dropping wetly onto the professor's prize Persian rug. The ivory lace pinafore was no longer remotely ivory. It had become a masterpiece in arterial spray. Fan-shaped bursts painted across her breasts and stomach gave the impression of some deranged avant-garde artist attempting to recreate the Sistine Chapel using only internal organs. One handprint was smeared diagonally across the fabric where she had casually wiped claws slick with Belphastus's insides. Her tattooed skin emerged between tears in the outfit like dark artwork beneath shattered stained glass. Black ink spiraled over pale flesh, occult sigils, roses, serpents, crescent moons, tiny skeletal saints. Blood had settled in the grooves of the tattoos, making them seem alive somehow. Her heavy goth makeup had smudged magnificently, black mascara streaked beneath golden feline eyes. Her lipstick was mostly gone now, replaced by blood smeared across her mouth and sharp white teeth. One fang still had a tiny... No. The thigh-high black Doc Martens, laced impossibly tight, dripped onto the carpet with a patient little tap. Drip, drip, drip. She looked like the physical manifestation of every bad decision a Victorian gentleman ever made after midnight. And somehow, still impossibly beautiful. I stared at her in silence, not really frightened. Thrillingly frightened, maybe a little. I had existed too long to be frightened easily. But impressed? Oh yes, profoundly impressed. There was artistry in what Vaughnt had done to Belphastus. Savage artistry. The sort of excessive violence that crossed the line into creative expression. The werecat looked down at herself with mild irritation. Then, delicately, absurdly delicately, considering the massacre surrounding her, she attempted to tidy herself up. She straightened the little lace collar, brushed a chunk of something off her shoulder, licked blood from the back of one hand with a rough pink tongue. Then she glanced toward me and signed with graceful, still-clawed fingers. Need to change. I blinked slowly. I initially wished to give a witty quip as a response. Something about her changing her physical form already. I thought better of it, and to be honest, it would have been a poor jest as I was still processing the fact that Belphastus had gone from feared infernal entity to abstract meat arrangement in under 30 seconds. I nodded to her once. Apparently, my permission needed to be granted. Bizarre. Vaughnt, in reply, gave a small appreciative incline of the head and padded elegantly toward the door, leaving faint bloody footprints behind her. As she passed, the little black demon cat sitting on the armchair watched her with interest in those enormous glowing eyes. I looked at the little black horror. She looked at me and shrugged a tiny feline shrug. "She's a cat," it said simply, going back to cleaning a clean paw. Her tone suggested this cat statement explained, well, everything. I considered this, then nodded. "Yes," I admitted quietly, "that does explain rather a lot." Because all cats, regardless of size, species, or infernal alignment, are fundamentally furry serial killers. Across the room, Father McKenzie suddenly made a choking noise. He turned violently and vomited into a coal scuttle. The sound was upsettingly wet.
Oh, dear Lord,
He gasped between heaves.
his spine came out.
Nobody comforted him. Astaroth pointed to where the said spine had landed somewhat artistically. Meanwhile, fate calmly refilled his teacup as though catastrophic demonologist disembowelment was merely an interruption to a pleasant afternoon. He selected another custard cream with scholarly precision, opened his Reader's Digest, which had not been present a moment ago, adjusted his glasses, which he had not been wearing, on his now once again eyeless face, and smiled in a fateful manner. Crunch. The biscuit echoed loudly in the ruined silence. I finally exhaled. The drawing room looked less like a place where one entertained guests and more like the aftermath of a lion attack inside a butcher's shop. Bits of Belphastus decorated the furniture. One eyeball stared accusingly from beneath a side table. The fire cracked politely. "Oh, I muttered. After a moment of patting cushions and moving viscera aside with visible annoyance, I managed to locate the television remote buried beneath a severed hand. I tried to hold it up between two fingers, not allowing the wet, bloody thing to touch much of me. Paused, looked at it, then casually tossed it into the fireplace. The flames flared green. "Pretty," I announced to the room. Father McKenzie whimpered. I pointed the remote toward the enormous television mounted above the mantel and began flicking through the infernal channels. Static, screaming. A cooking program involved damned souls and bechamel sauce. A war in 3 dimensions. An advert for cursed annuities. Finally, the screen stabilized. I leaned forward slightly. "Well then, let us see where Belphastus ended up," I murmured.
Belphastus the Unclaimed. I became aware of 2 things simultaneously. First of all, I were fucking dead. Secondly, death had apparently been designed by an absolute cunt. There were no glorious inferno, no screaming choir of the damned, no obsidian throne, no rivers of blood or mountains of skulls. Frankly, if one had spent several millennia committing atrocities in the service of hell, one expected a little bit of theatre. Instead, there were fuck all. Just darkness. Not poetic darkness either. Not the velvet dark of midnight forests or candlelit crypts. No. This was administrative darkness. The sort of darkness you found behind your eyelids during a migraine. And in the middle of it hung a door. Just a door. I stared at it. It floated in the nothingness ahead of me, with all the grandeur of a cheap landlord's bathroom replacement. Beige wood, brass handle, slightly warped near the bottom as though somebody had once kicked it repeatedly during an argument about the fucking rent. I was still very confused at this point. Something had happened. There had been a room. Lucifer. The Professor, that bastard. T, the cat. Oh, fuck. Oh, no. That cat. Memory returned in wet flashes. Claws, teeth, lace, soaked in crimson. The terrible sound of my organs being redistributed across expansive, expensive upholstery. I slowly touched my chest. Whole again, sort of. I mean, dead, certainly, but structurally intact.
Well,
Came a voice beside me, smooth as poisoned silk.
you died again.
I turned towards the voice somewhat sharply. Astaroth stood beside me in a form almost painful to perceive properly. Again, as always, in another exquisite form. It were beautiful in the way storms are beautiful. Tall, androgynous, elegant beyond human standards, dressed in black so perfect it seemed to consume the concept of light itself. Its smile held the warmth of winter surgery.
It was...
Astaroth continued with obvious delight whilst taking a sip from an ever-present glass of something red and bubbling.
spectacularly unpleasant.
I stared. It's what you kinda do when meeting this particular Duke of Hell. I sort of remember the Catwoman thing, I told him, scratching me head.
Oh, yes.
Astaroth laughed.
Everyone remembers the Vaughnt. She is
Another sip, giving the creature blood-red lips.
so particularly memorable.
I sighed deeply and somewhat with acceptance and regret. At this point, I noticed the ring was gone. The ring of summoning that I had banked on to get me. To get me what? Wait a minute. I really died. I laughed, seeing the cosmic joke for what it actually was.
Oh, no. Not just died. It was so much more than that. You exploded into several emotional and, well, nutritional pieces. Delicious.
A pause. The demon was happy with this description.
In fact,
Astaroth added thoughtfully.
at one point, your spine was on the chandelier.
It pointed above our heads now, and there it was. A blood-spattered chandelier with what I assumed was my spine incorporated into its fine detail. I looked back at the demon, who were rocking back and forth with delight as it gazed at the grotesque piece of art, with a smile that were too wide. I closed my eyes to clear my thoughts. I'd served hell for a literal few lifetimes. I'd orchestrated massacres for its divinity. I'd driven the innocent to sin. I had coded at least 3 computer viruses that damaged more people than any of the great plagues and created one massively unfair tax system. And I, this faithful servant, had been murdered by what looked like a Victorian goth maid with anger issues. Which actually, she was.
The little demon cat said that Vaughnt was a cat.
Astaroth said with a shrug, as though this clarified everything. Yeah, she were a peculiar lot of a cat. Frankly, I felt that explained the matter completely. I looked back at the floating door. Where the very fuck am I? Astaroth's grin widened.
Oh, you're in hell. Your hell.
Oh, how the thing's eyes glittered and changed hues. It were enjoying this sort of torture so much. Did I not like that? Or it, for that matter. The judgment-filled eyes narrowed at the door. That's it,
Oh, no.
said Astaroth softly.
No, that door, my dear, is merely the way in.
Something old and cold shifted inside, and it squirmed in my guts. For the first time in centuries, I felt genuine unease. Not fear exactly, no, but sort of dreadful anticipation one feels before opening a letter from human resources. Slowly, I approached the door. The brass handle was slightly sticky. That disturbed me more than any endless void. And I hesitated. Behind me, Astaroth smiled with the patient excitement of someone waiting for fireworks. I opened the door to the demon's crazy laughter, and reality vanished around me. One moment there was darkness, and the next, fluorescent lighting. The lights buzzed overhead with the exact tone required to trigger despair in the soul. Were it like a break room? A warehouse break room? Possibly. Not a modern one with trendy coffee machines and motivational posters. No, this were old, filled with an old misery, an industrial misery. The air smelled faintly of burnt toast and damp cardboard, microwave curry and exhausted ghosts of cigarettes smoked outside loading bays during unpaid breaks. The ceiling tiles sagged slightly with long, unconsidered brown water stains. A vending machine hummed in the corner like an asthmatic robot waiting for death that never came. Every button displayed sold out, except one that were labelled Egg Mayo Triangle. The machine wanted £14.80 for it, the fucking bastard. A microwave sat on a counter nearby. Inside was something that had exploded in approximately 2007 and been left as a warning to others. Possibly sardines, judging by the fucking stench. A kettle wheezed quietly beside a mountain of mismatched mugs. One read, "World's Best Dead." Another simply said, "Don't talk to me until your second coming." The implication being that after tea, talking remained unwelcome. Perhaps. I took this all in slowly. A dilapidated and stained sofa occupied one corner of the room. Its never-nice floral pattern had faded into colours found only in nicotine, old bodily fluids and despair. Above it, at an angle that would make an OCD sufferer need to claw their fucking eyes out, hung a calendar. Not sports cars, not glamour models. Well, there might have been once glamour models, I suppose, but it were just fucking dead women. Semi-nude corpses posed disturbingly cheerful positions beneath months of the year. Miss February appeared to have drowned in a wheelie bin. Good God, I whispered.
No, not me,
said Astaroth from somewhere behind me.
I'm just middle management, darling.
I ignored this shite attempt at humour. There were a fridge. A handwritten sign attached to it read, "Whoever keeps stealing my yoghurts will be reported to Bert." Another note beneath it read, "Fuck off, Bert. No one wants your fucking yoghurts." I explored a little more, approaching a tiny plastic table in the centre of the room. There were forms on it, thousands of the fuckers. Stacks and stacks and stacks, printed in grey ink. Each one demanded signatures, approvals, incident reports, requests for authorization. One sheet near the top read, "Request for eternal torment review. Estimated processing time, 6 to 8 millennia." I felt something break inside me. Not physically. Spiritually. "Please, no," I begged. Astaroth suddenly appeared in a red sequin ball gown on the top of the fridge, cross-legged and showing too much thigh. Filing the nails, or maybe they were claws. Hand, pointy, hard, spiky things at the end of the fingers.
Oh, yes, little darling.
"No torture."
Oh, there'll be torture.
Astaroth gestured around the room.
This is merely orientation.
The other door into the room burst open, and in walked. "Oh, fuck no. Oh, fuck this. This is..." A zombie in an Amazombie boiler suit, a flat cap and a clipboard walked in.
How do? Welcome to your first day at Amazombie. Do you get it? Amazombie. And I work at Amazombie. My name's Bert.
The Walking Dead said to me, before drawing out the battered plastic chair from beneath the plastic table and sitting down.
You'll love it here. Oh, we just have a laugh here at Amazombie. Honestly, you'll love it here so much. You'll want to stay forever.
He cracked up at this. I assume it was meant to be some kind of fucking joke.
Do you get it?
He asked. I shrugged, shook my head.
Oh, well, work on that sense of humour of yours, because like the joke is you better fucking love it, because you are here forever. Now,
He said to me.
let's get on with your orientation. This shouldn't take more than a few hundred years to get through. Alright, zombie, we've got the A to Z of services, so let's go through the services from A to Z. A. Oh, hang on a minute. What's A for? Oh, I've got it. A is for feeding to horses. A for horses. B. What's B for? Oh, I know. Before and after. Aye, that's how that one goes. And then C. Oh, C. Aye. C is for pouring round ships and under bridges.
I shook my head as I placed my face in the upturned palms of my hands. And for the first time in my existence, I wept like a fucking baby.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.